Hello, Zeteskians. Today we're going to be doing something different. I'm going to try to recount the story of the TV show The Walking Dead without looking anything up. I saw this show maybe years ago. I'm not sure when. It is off the air now. It did finish. And I know there was a big gap for the final season where I didn't watch it live. I watched it a couple years later. And that was a couple years ago. So I'm guessing it went off the air like maybe early into the pandemic. I'm not sure. So the show opens with Rick Grimes. He's a sheriff or a cop or something like that in, I want to say, Georgia in the US. And him and his partner are trying to arrest somebody on the side of the road. And Rick gets shot and ends up in a coma. And while he's in a coma, the zombie apocalypse starts. So by the time he wakes up, this is months after the apocalypse has happened. Probably not years, probably just months. I think just months. Could be years, I don't know. So he wakes up, and I think this is where we see the iconic "Don't Dead" open inside, where it's written on hospital doors and they're chained together. And it's supposed to say "Don't open dead inside," but it's written strangely. So he gets out of the hospital and he discovers that zombies exist, and then he goes on a journey to try and find his wife and any other survivors that he can find. Oh yeah, and he has a child too. Meanwhile, and the show kind of flashes back between different groups of survivors at different times. So, meanwhile, we see his cop partner, Shane, and his wife, I want to say Lori, and his son is Carl from the memes, where he kind of pronounces it Coral. They are in a pretty large group of survivors. I want to say like 30 to 40 people. They've got a bunch of vehicles, a bunch of RVs and other trucks and stuff. There's a couple of redneck guys that have motorcycles, and they're like hunting squirrels to help feed the survivors. One of those two rednecks are Daryl and Merle, I think, and they grew up poor, so they've been hunting squirrels for like 40 years. So a zombie gets into their camp and kills a bunch of people, and then some of their friends are coming back as zombies, and that whole camp kind of splinters, and everybody runs away in separate directions. Some of them regroup a bit later on. Meanwhile, Rick goes to the sheriff's station or police station, grabs a bunch of guns, gets a horse. I guess it's a police horse, and he heads into the big city of Atlanta, Georgia. And I think that's where we see the iconic. It's kind of like the poster of the show, where it's Rick on a horse walking down the highway into the city. And in real life, when the Texas snowstorm hit, people were comparing that poster screenshot to real life footage when there was like an inch of snow or something like that, and it was people were saying it was pretty ridiculous that such a small amount of snow shut down the whole state. Anyways, so he gets into town and gets surrounded. loses his horse, ends up crawling under a tank for some reason. There's like a tank abandoned in the middle of the city, and there's a younger guy who's like a parkour expert or something like that, named Glenn, who I remember his character is Korean. And he's like on the radio trying to help Rick out. And Rick gets into the tank and shoots a gun at a zombie in there, and his ears are ringing after that. So eventually Rick meets up with Glenn, and Glenn leads him back to the other group of survivors. And I think that's when Rick finds out that Shane and Lori have been a couple since he was in a coma. So kind of his best friend and his wife. And so it's a bit awkward. But then zombies continue to attack, and there's this elderly guy who's kind of like holding the group together and faking car troubles to try and get people to talk through their issues instead of just ignoring them. But he gets attacked and killed by zombies, and the group decides to head to the CDC, Center for Disease Control, to figure out if any surviving remnants of the government are working on a cure or some sort of a fix to stop the zombies. And then on their way there, Shane and Rick have a fight, and Rick shoots Shane and he dies. Or maybe Carl shoots Shane. All three of them are there in like a grassy field somewhere. So Shane dies, and they think it's over. But then Shane wakes up as a zombie, and they realize that they are all infected. All of the survivors are already infected. They don't need to be killed by a zombie. They just need to die, and they will automatically become a zombie. So knowing that they're all infected, they are en route to the CDC, and they get there. They do find some scientists that are still there, but the scientists have kind of given up hope, and they're gonna like explode the building or launch a nuke or something like that, like very much giving up, trying to take out as many zombies as they can. And so the survivors kind of see this happen, and they drive away, and the scientists offer like whoever wants to stay to die in this explosion can stay, and whoever wants to leave can leave. So there's a couple of people that choose to stay and die, but most of the survivors choose to leave and survive. And that's the end of season 1. And I don't remember how many seasons are in this show. It's like maybe, I want to say like 10 or 16 or something like that. Season 2, they find a farm. Carl gets shot because one of the farmers is like hunting deer, and Carl is standing on the other side of the deer, like trying to pet it. So the bullet goes straight through both the deer and Carl. Somehow he doesn't die from that, though. Getting shot straight through the chest, he survives. But they stay at the farm until he's recovered, and they kind of like try to barricade it. They haven't seen much zombies because they're not near any cities. But near the end of that season, zombies do attack the farm, and the farmhouse burns down. And and they take a few of the farmers that survived and the rest of the original group, and they head off. I think at that point they kind of get separated from each other during the chaos. And then season 3, some of them find their way to an abandoned prison, and they clear it out of zombies, and then they kind of set it up as a fortress. And they're able to grow crops in the fields within the fence of the outside area of the prison. And then others of the original survivor group and end up finding a civilized town that has like walls and it's protected and whatnot. And that town is run by a guy who calls himself the governor. And it seems like he's very much manipulative, almost like it's kind of like there's this creepy vibe where it's like everybody's acting happy, but also there's very strict rules, so they're kind of enslaved workforce, but then they're still like worshiping this ruler, so it's kind of a creepy vibe, kind of like Amityville Horror or North Korea vibes. And I think he tries to assault one of the women or feed her to a zombie or something like that. They are keeping some of the dead townsfolk in like a morgue or something like that, and they don't know yet that that all the survivors are already infected. So this old lady dies of old age, and their town doctor is going to do the funeral dressing or whatever. And the survivors from the outside are trying to warn them, like, you have to like shoot her in the head or stab her in the brain or something like that to prevent her from becoming a zombie. They don't listen. The old lady zombie kills the doctor, and that snowballs into the whole town kind of getting attacked. And at some point during this, the governor has one of the lady survivors, and he puts her in like a dungeon room underground, and there's also a zombie in that room. So I'm not sure if he was like intending to kill her or what. And then the governor finds out about the prison, and he takes like an army with tanks and such to attack it for seemingly no reason. So during the siege of the prison, the father from the farm from season 2, he's kind of become this like Santa grandpa figure. He has like spaghetti Wednesdays and whatnot, or spaghetti Tuesday, someday spaghetti. And he had lost a leg when they were taking the prison. The group know that if they amputate the limbs, or they were doing it as like a last resort, amputate the limb to try and save his life after he got bitten by a zombie. It worked. He survived for however long the whole thing happened with all their farming in the prison and whatnot until the siege. The governor captured him and cut his throat with like a sword. It was kind of weird. And then fighting breaks out. People are throwing like grenades and stuff. I think it might have been Glenn who ran up and tossed a grenade down the barrel of the tank gun, and then it exploded. All the noise, of course, attracts zombies from all over, and the governor loses an eye during the fight, but he survives. And people survive on both sides, but there's a lot of dead as well. And during this siege / war battle, whatever it is, Lori is giving birth to a child. No, I think she gave birth earlier in that season. Or maybe it was during the siege. I don't know. Anyway, it's not Rick's child, it's Shane's child. And Rick kind of suspects this, but he's going to take it anyways because Shane is dead. And it is his wife anyways. Carl and a couple other survivors are there to help the birth. So Carl gets to meet his like little sibling. And then they have to like run away to fight or something like that. And when they go back to check on Lori, she has been eaten by a zombie, like entirely eaten. The zombie has this big bloated belly, and Carl shoots it in the head. And then when Carl tells Rick about this, that's another meme where you see Rick, he's got like a white t-shirt and he's crying, and Carl is there in the foreground. A lot of people have turned that meme template into a lot of dad jokes, but it was originally like Rick finding out that his wife is dead. After the prison, there's a bit of the show where it follows the governor trying to find a new community and like try to be a better person. And for some reason, being a better person involves growing a beard. I've heard that men with beards are more trustworthy than men without. In real life, maybe this is just the show writers implementing that into their show. And he's got an eye patch and all that. And my memory is a bit fuzzier with these next few seasons. So, okay, so the survivors from the prison attack get separated into a bunch of different splinter groups. One of the splinter groups goes into the big city, finds a hospital that's still up and running, and they've like sealed off the bottom floors so that zombies can come eat the corpses that they throw down the elevator shaft or whatever. And they're all operating up on like the 10th floor or above. And the blonde lady, I want to say she's the girl from the farm. She tries to be a nurse there or help out there. And then there's another survivor that's trying to like rescue her because she's kind of kept there against her will. Similar situation as the governor's town, where it's like, yeah, she's helping, but she's not allowed to leave. It's like they are holding her in debt for all the food and supplies that she takes, and her wages aren't enough to keep up with that. And during the hostage negotiation, she ends up being killed. Um, Another splinter group ends up hearing an advertisement on the radio saying that there's a group of survivors in this town called Sanctuary. And they head over there and they find out it's cannibals. They are attracting more survivors to there to then kill them and eat them. Um, and then another splinter group gets ambushed by, I think, a different group of cannibals on the road. And unbeknownst to them, uh, the guy that they take his legs and start eating them, he had already been bitten by a zombie and he was just like waiting for the infection to take him. So he laughs at them saying they're eating tainted meat. And we don't actually get to know if eating tainted meat will turn you into a zombie, because before that can happen, all of these people are killed by other means. So either, getting shot or eaten by zombies or whatever. And then another splinter group finds this priest guy who has locked himself up in a church, and he feels really guilty because during the early outbreaks he locked himself in there with the town's whole supply of food rations. It was like a food bank, but also a church, because of course it's in the US. So yeah. So he locked all of his townsfolk out, all the people who attended his sermons and whatnot. He locks them out of the building and keeps all the food for them himself, and he hears them die. And then he stays there for like years on end, unclear timeline, before our survivors find him. And they convince him to join them and try to repent and whatnot. Also, by then, he was running out of food. Meanwhile, another splinter group finds a place called Hilltop, and it's like a big, almost mansion kind of place on a hill, and it's got like a fenced-in area for trailers and whatnot to park, and it's got some farm fields outside of the fence. And it was just this one guy who was living there, and he doesn't really know what he's doing. And then people just started showing up and joining. And one of our survivors ends up kind of taking control and saying she can run the place better than him. And her name is Maggie, and she is Glenn's wife. But I think I missed a step in the story. I'm not sure if Glenn is still alive at that point in the story. Okay, so I guess backing up before Hilltop, there's Alexandria is another town that they find, and there's an architect there who helps them build walls and all that. He's an old man, and he's a drunk and abusive. And their doctor is also kind of drunk and abusive. It might have been that they went mad with power after the outbreak or something like that. And it turns out he wasn't such a great architect because the walls do fall down almost on their own. The zombies are like attacking, but the walls are not very sturdy. There's another. There's a lady from there who was working at like the food bank. They were kind of rationing their remaining canned food and supplies. She ends up near some railroad tracks with Daryl. His crossbow had been stolen by bad guys, and she gets shot in the back of the head with the crossbow, and it like pokes her eye out, and then it's just like hanging right in the foreground of the image. So the guy who stole the crossbow has really bad burns on one half of his face, and he was working for Negan, and his wife from before the outbreak, I think, was also there. But Negan had this thing where it was like he gets to pick women and doesn't respect the marriages of his followers or something like that. So Burnface Guy, his background story is that in the early part of the pandemic, he and a group of campers were out in like tents, and the zombies attacked and kicked over a lamp, and there was a fire, and his tent ended up melting onto his face and burning him pretty badly. And then while he was recovering from that, him and his wife found Negan. And Negan is kind of older gentleman, maybe middle-aged. He has a leather jacket, and he's got this baseball bat with barbed wire on it that he calls Lucille, and it's named after his dead wife, who died during the early outbreak of the zombies. And so he became kind of like a warlord figure, where he's like ruling people through threats of death. And at one point he captures Daryl, and he's got him locked up. He's feeding him dog food, that kind of stuff. That's when Burnface Guy gets the crossbow. And he's got some like, from what I remember, Negan has like really far-reaching influence. Like he's got his main base, and then he's got like towns all around that send him tribute on threat of violence. So they're sending him like food and supplies and water and all that kind of stuff. And then he also has groups of armed guards setting up at radio towers to help communication throughout his empire. And all his guards, they have this like cult like thing where there's like, we are Negan, everybody is Negan. But the real Negan is the guy with the baseball bat. And they end up getting in a conflict with our main group of survivors who are in some town. I'm not sure if it's Alexandria or a different place. And I think they end up killing Carl there. And that makes Rick freak out. and then he kind of declares war on Negan, and he rallies the different cities against him, and they siege and destroy the stronghold and all that, and try to free any of the slave prisoners. Oh yeah, Negan was branding people with like metal cow brands as well. And Negan, one of the first times we meet him, or I guess not the first times. Yeah, we had met like his goons first, but the first time we see actual Negan is Rick and the others were trying to set up like traps and attack Negan's forces, but they get outdone by Negan's forces and they get trapped, and he holds them all um, captive, and they're like on their knees, and he like points at them with the baseball bat saying "eeny meeny miny mo," and then he kills Glenn. And Maggie is either pregnant at this time with Glenn's child or already has the child, so she's really upset. And it was a big cliffhanger because it was like you saw that and you know he killed somebody, but you had to wait until the whole next season to see who he killed. And I heard that they actually filmed secretly like different endings or whatnot with like, you know, like a sandbag, a wooden thing to stand in for whoever was dying. So even the actors couldn't spoil it. But Abraham was there too. He's an orange-haired military guy. And Abraham, we met him because him and a couple other military people had found this what do you call it when somebody always lies? Compulsive liar, I guess. Pathological liar. Yeah, they found this pathological liar who was like some neat you know on he tried to talk smart, but he wasn't super smart, and he was like bluffing constantly. Is a really greasy guy. I think his name was Eugene. And he convinced them that he was like a secret government officer, and that they needed to take him to Washington to speak with the president. Of course, he was just doing this to keep himself safe. He didn't really have any connections. But he knew enough big words that he fooled them. And anyways, they group up with the main survivors, and then they're there when Negan kills Glenn. And I think Negan kills Abraham the same night, but I'm not completely sure. I think he does kill 2 people that night. And Eugene turns out to be useful later on. He does get captured by Negan, and he helps them with some science stuff so that they are manufacturing their own bullets out of some old steel mill kind of place. Because everybody was running low on bullets by this time, because years and years and years into the pandemic, into the the zombie apocalypse. What else happened? So I think the war against Negan is when Hilltop, run by Maggie after Glenn's death, Alexandria, run by Rick after the architect's death, and then I think there were a couple of other places that all grouped up to fight against Negan. I'm not sure if Seaside, Shoreside, whatever that place was called, was involved at this point. They were definitely involved in a war. I'm just not sure if it was this war. But Oceanside, I think that's what it was called. Oceanside was a community of all women. They had like killed or abandoned all the men there. They had like fled to this area, and um, they were pretty militaristic, but they do get convinced to join the kind of multi city alliance. And that doesn't just mean military, it also means like trading supplies. So them being a fishing village, they would trade for like vegetables from hillside and like maybe, I'm not sure what Alexandria was contributing, but maybe medical supplies or something like that. Um, then after they take down Negan, they actually like cut his throat with a shard of glass in the middle of a field, but then they save his life and they put him in prison in Alexandria. And by this time, Shane's child, like Carl's little sibling, there's a bit of a time skip, and suddenly she's like 6 years old and talking and carrying a gun and all that. Meanwhile, Rick had remarried to Michonne, who was this like samurai figure, a black woman. She had her brother and her husband on chains. They were both zombies. She had removed their lower jaw and all their teeth and their arms, and she kept them as like it would deter other zombies from attacking her if she had them close by. They died because they were getting high in the apocalypse, and she had been like warning them that they were dumb before this happened. And they had been irresponsible before the zombie outbreak as well. Um, she ends up having to kill them in order to not get noticed by another like army or enemy humans, something like that. But then she joins up and she has a kid with Rick, a little guy with like curly hair. I don't remember his name. Um, and he's like maybe a year or two younger than the girl, Rick's kind of adopted daughter, kind of half daughter. I don't know, what do you call that? Um, and the daughter doesn't even remember Carl really, because she was so young when Carl died, so she doesn't really remember having an older brother. And they've got this town. At one point, there's a kingdom where there's this zookeeper guy who was also like a stage actor before the zombie outbreak. And he has this good relationship with this tiger, um, because he had helped save its life or something while it was captive. Somehow, I don't remember the story. But anyways, once the zombie outbreak happened, he puts on this English accent uh, and has this tiger following him around to kind of intimidate people and like bluff people into joining his kingdom. And he keeps the town like that for a while. And one of our main survivors he ends up kind of marrying her, kind of making her queen. And they are part of the trading alliance, the multi-city alliance as well. But the kingdom eventually gets attacked and burned down, and the tiger dies, saving his life, saving the king's life from a bunch of zombies. And then there's another town. I'm not sure if it's Alexandria or somewhere else, but they had these water pumps, and someone had infiltrated their town and set the water filter to no longer filter. So everybody was getting sick and dying of like waterborne illnesses. Um, and I think that was around the time when the skinwalkers showed up. And I'm calling them skinwalkers. I don't remember what they called themselves, but it was a group of survivors that wore zombie face skins over as like masks on top of their faces, and they pretended to be zombies, so they like walked around with the zombie horde, and they were using them both as protection as well as like to attack enemy humans. And they would whisper um, to each other while in the herd to like help control it, and move it around. And they would have like hidden knives and stuff like that, to attack, ambush. And the one of the main, I think the main leader lady, her daughter ended up defecting and trying to join up with Alexandria, but then that just encouraged her mom to attack and destroy Alexandria. And um, and then there's another group that I'm going to call the junkyard people, or the trash people. They were living in a literal junkyard, little literal one. They had put like shipping containers as walls around it, and at one point they capture Rick and hold him prisoner, and they speak in really like broken caveman language. And Rick offers some sort of a deal where if they help him fight this other enemy, then he'll reward them with some stuff afterwards, maybe food or whatever. Um, and later on, we find out that that main caveman talking woman leader was actually in contact with some sort of like government military operation where they have like working helicopters um, and like military equipment and stuff like that. And they're trying to find and kidnap. Um, I think they call them like type A, type B, something like that, where it's like leaders and soldiers, and they're trying to like build up their army again. And they think Rick is going to be a leader, but once they actually capture him and knock him out and stuff like that, they're like, he's not that great of a leader. Call him a soldier instead. And so he gets taken off by helicopter, and Michonne's really upset about it, and she goes out searching for him on her own. And Um, Negan somewhat gets rehabilitated in Alexandria, and he's there fighting on their side against the Skinwalkers before all this Rick kidnapping happens. Um, there's also a part where they're trying to build a bridge to help better connect their different cities over this river, but it gets attacked and destroyed. Um, okay, during season one, there was this throwaway character, whereas this black guy in the city, he was living with his son. He was uh, upset because his wife had turned into a zombie. I think killed his son, something like that. So his wife was walking around being a zombie, like out in front of their house, and he was unable to shoot her because he had some emotional hangups. And Rick meets him, and uh, they go their separate ways. But he eventually, after Rick leaves, he decides to move on with his life, and I think he shoots the zombie wife. Anyways, he shows up like years and years later. Years and years later, they find him with this compound where he's like kind of lost his mind, and he's got these spiky traps out front, and the zombies just kind of walk into it and impale themselves, and then he goes up and knocks their brain out and takes them off of the trap to like throw them aside to reset it. It's just a stick that they walk into, or a bunch of sticks. And so he's just like repeating, gotta clear it, gotta clear it, gotta clear it. And meeting other surviving humans reminds him of being human again. So he tries to join their group. And he's an interesting character because there's a spin-off show called Fear the Walking Dead that starts right at the point of the zombie apocalypse, like while Rick was still in a coma. And it was supposed to be more of a horror rather than a drama, but it does eventually devolve into drama as well. And not Negan, Morgan. Morgan is this guy with the zombie wife, and he is one of the main characters that flips back and forth between the two shows. So he does show up like later on. He's got this like helmet and football gear set up, and he's going around trying to find Rick again. And he meets up with them, I think, in the Kingdom or maybe Alexandria, something like that. And then he screws off when the war breaks out, or shortly before, and he goes down to like Texas or something like that for some reason. So he's just basically trying to find other groups of survivors and trying to connect them, I think. But back to the main show. I'm trying to think, after the kingdom falls and the skinwalkers are all killed, there's these massive hordes of zombies that they try to like lead off a cliff into a quarry. There's some hiccups along the way, but eventually it basically works. Their plan works. And there's a group trying to say like the end is near or something like that. The end is the beginning. And I don't remember if they were in Fear the Walking Dead or the main show, but they are basically trying to find the nuclear launch codes and a nuclear submarine to basically just end the world, or as much of it as they can. And I believe their plan succeeds, at least partially. So there is a part of the show where they are like going through a radioactive wasteland, and they have to um, wear special outfits to get through, and they have to worry about breathing and in the toxic ash or something like that. And there are radioactive zombies in there too. And there's like a nurse lady who gets cancer because of this, and um, yeah, I think that was in Fear the Walking Dead, actually. I'm not sure. But in the main show, what happens after the Skinwalkers? Rick gets kidnapped and taken away, and we think we're going to find him again. But I don't think we ever do. And Michonne goes off on like a boat or something to try and find him. And the people with the helicopters, we do get to know more about them, because one of our survivors is able to like ambush one of them, or like find stockpiles where they're keeping their fuel at like fuel refueling stations in mountaintops or whatever. Um, hmm. There is another major city, like one that's way bigger than any of the others they found earlier. And it's like an entire like government urban area situation. And they have soldiers that go out and clear new buildings to like expand their civilization. And it's another like very authoritarian, very dictatorship kind of situation. Um, I think the way that they get in there is Eugene builds a radio, and there's a girl on the other side of the radio who wants to meet him and like be his girlfriend or something like that. And he's like he's not very popular with the ladies, to put it lightly. So they go out to meet her. There's a crazy pink-haired lady that they find who's been living on her own for like 5 years or more, that they find along the way. But eventually they get to this place, they get captured and processed, and all their weapons and stuff get taken away. Then they get put to work inside this new civilization. And it's kind of like they have to prove that they're trustworthy through working and obeying before they get real citizenship and get access to the amenities in there. And it's like a really swanky place. They have like ice cream, and they have like children playing, and they have like thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of survivors in there. It's like an entire state worth of people. I guess not state, at least a major metropolitan area. And it's run by this lady who was actually like a senator or someone in the US government before the zombie outbreak happened. But she's basically become the dictator afterwards. And her son is an asshole and um, getting other people killed. And I think there's some group in there. I'm not sure if it's the son or like military people, but they are convincing wandering travelers to go out to this one building where there's like a safe full of money or something like that. And, but it's surrounded by zombies. So they're trying to get to that money and they're sacrificing strangers' lives to do it. And the reason they want the money is because this lady that's in charge still uses US dollars as currency. So they think if they can get that money, they'll be rich and they'll just like pour it into the economy without anybody noticing. That all backfires. The son gets killed and turned into a zombie, and the lady gets deposed and I think killed. And the few survivors that were like prisoner there break out and escape. And around the time that all this is happening, a massive horde of zombies that she had been kind of denying the existence of to preserve peace and prevent panic, they actually show up and demolish the whole city or whatever. And I just remembered, after the main Skinwalker faction is defeated and the leader lady is killed, and her daughter kind of joins the good guys survivors, there's a part where her main right hand guy, who's this really tall, like 8 foot tall guy, he takes control over their surviving skinwalkers, and he builds up a new horde of zombies by like going to collect them and getting them to follow him and stuff like that, because they all, group herd mentality, they follow the noises. And he leads that in an attack as like revenge. And he's a really strange one because people keep stabbing him in the face and in the chest and stuff like that, and he survives. And like they throw him off of a 4-story building, and he survives. And it was real strange. Like, it was a real break from the typical, like, people normally die pretty easily on the show, and he for some reason had this superhuman invulnerability. But I think he does eventually die. And I think that's near the end of the show. And so near the end of the show, the final couple of episodes are all just setting up spin-off series. It's a really disappointing ending to the show. But like we've seen with Game of Thrones and with other series, is the ending is really hard to stick. So I think there was a spin-off show where Michonne finds Rick, but he's in Europe. So she does get on. We saw her get on the boat, and she was going to do something, and we knew Rick was taken away by the helicopter people, but we didn't know any more details than that. Daryl, one of the squirrel hunters from season 1, he was a fan favorite in the show. A lot of fans were saying, like, oh, if Daryl dies, we riot. Just jokes like that. He and Carol, who was an abused housewife in season 1, and her husband died pretty early on when that first caravan got attacked around the time that Rick showed up. The backstory is that actress was like a stagehand or something like that, or assistant before this, and this was her first like acting gig, and the writers said that they would keep her on as long as she wanted to continue acting in the series. So people who knew the behind the scenes stuff knew that character was never going to die unless the actress wanted to stop. But those two characters hook up in the show. I don't know if they ever actually like become intimate partners, but they're definitely like best friends kind of thing. And um, they both have this similar character type where they don't really like being in these civilized city settlements. They would rather be on the outskirts fending for themselves. Um, Carol does try to be in the city for a while, and she ends up being this like grandmotherly figure where she's baking cakes and cookies for people and being really kind and giving pies around. But um, there's this creepy undertone where it's like, oh yeah, she could snap at any moment and kill everyone. And as time goes on, she gets to be more and more of like a Rambo type figure, where she will go in, be really sneaky, snipe people, and rescue people and all that kind of stuff. And Daryl, he gets beaten up a whole bunch and captured and kidnapped several times through the series, and he always manages to make it out. At one point, he kind of goes insane and he's wearing this necklace made of zombie ears for some reason. And somebody sees him like walking covered in mud and they think he's a zombie, so they shoot at him. They clip him, but he survives. And uh, I heard a rumor that there might have been a spin-off in the works where those two go on their own wacky adventures, but I don't know if that show was ever actually made. Eugene and the lady from the radio, it turns out she wasn't supposed to be using the radio to contact people outside that sort of US currency fiefdom or whatever it was. But they do get together in the city once he is past his trial of like proving he's trustworthy. And she helps them to take down the lady in charge. She's like her office assistant or something like that. So she has a lot of keys and access to the information that would be very damning. I think that's pretty much it. This is definitely a severely abridged version of the show because this is like 10 to 16 seasons, maybe like 20 episodes a season, and each episode is like half an hour to 45 minutes long. So this is definitely a very abridged look at The Walking Dead. But I think it was an interesting show while it lasted. And I think the last couple of seasons got a bit off the rails. And I was hoping for it to go a different direction. When they introduced the skinwalkers and it was like, oh, intelligent zombies that can hold weapons and climb up ladders and stuff like that, I thought that was going in a different direction. I didn't think it was just people disguised as zombies. And they were playing with the idea that some of these earlier zombies were really rotting and falling apart. And, this zombie apocalypse could solve itself over time as these zombies decay. It seemed like, I think there was somebody on YouTube that did like a scientific analysis of it, and might have been Film Theory actually. They were saying that under normal circumstances, a rotting corpse would not last that long, but maybe something in the virus or whatever delayed or slowed down the decaying process. So you could imagine the little girl with the gun wasn't even born yet or conceived yet when the apocalypse started, and then she was like maybe 6 to 10 years old by the time the series ended. Because the seasons don't line up with in-universe years. So even though it was like 10 to 16 years outside, it was less time in the show. But still, like, that's way too long. Any of the first round of zombies should have decayed long ago. And in the show, we do see them like, oh, some of the zombies, you poke them with a stick and their whole front torso skin falls off. So a lot of them are really badly rotten. But then there's like waves of fresh zombies coming as different groups of survivors got attacked. So it would have been interesting to see them tackle that situation, but I don't think they ever fully, pardon the pun, but fully fleshed out that aspect of the story. And it was always really strange when Rick, like the main character that we've been following for most of the show, like he was there episode 1, we were viewing things from his perspective, when he just vanished from the show and the show kept going. That was kind of weird. And then the whole thing with the Fear the Walking Dead spinoff, that I think lasted for like 6 or 8 seasons. And I did mention that Morgan crossed over between the shows several times. Yeah, so that's what it. So this video is more of just audio. I'm speaking off the cuff. I don't have a script. Let me know if you like this kind of thing. I could absolutely do a similar foggy memory recollection of many other TV shows, video game series, things like that. But I want to know if the audience is interested in that kind of stuff. And otherwise, stay tuned. There's lots more Dungeons and Dragons story coming. And I do still have a couple of World of Warcraft videos in the works, but I don't have scripts written for them yet. I just have the video recording. So touring, Battle for Azeroth, and a couple other continents that I've missed along the way. Otherwise, the Dungeons and Dragons is the main focus of the channel for the next few months, foreseeable future. So hopefully you like that stuff. And let me know if you have any suggestions to make the channel better.